Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
The reality is, in this day and age, especially at specialty or second-run cinemas out there in the universe, that you need to program it. And if you program it, they will come. And if you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you are in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast, where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of entertainment industry professionals and we pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more, in a light and in a conversational fashion. And if you like how we do things around here, I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that you do, because let's face it, you're listening right now. And if you are, subscribe. Hit that subscribe button, give us a 5-star rating on your podcast provider of choice. We're available pretty much everywhere, places like Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Google, and plus we archive every single one of our episodes over at our In the Seats YouTube channel. So if you can give us a like and subscribe there as well, we would absolutely appreciate it. Also, don't hesitate to check us out on social media. We're on the Facebook, we're on the Twitter, we're on the Instagram, we're on the Letterboxd, and we're on the TikTok for all sorts of fun updates. And finally, and I do dare say most importantly, please pay us a visit over at In the Seats. InTheSeats.ca for all the latest and greatest from the world of film, television, basically the moving image at large. Because, if we love to watch it and write about it and talk about it, we love it even more when you come by and read about it and listen about it. So please, do us that kindness and pay us a visit. On this episode, we got a fun one. We are sitting down with some fellow podcasters. Friends of the show and also friends of cinema in general. They're filmmakers, they're writers in their own right, but they're also programmers of screening series and repertory cinemas here in Toronto and in various locations across our great country. We are talking with the team behind the new podcast, well, newish anyway, Movies and Chaos, which you can find on all of your favorite podcast platform providers, and it's about cult movies and their legacies and just sort of current topics in the world today and how everything sort of ties all the way back in. But again, it's really an interesting podcast, and it's bringing up some really, really interesting discussions that aren't afraid to get a little philosophical at times, which quite frankly I think is a darn good thing. But it's it allows to continue the discussion, but also it kind of highlights and celebrates cult film as well, which is something that I talked specifically with Serena, who, if you don't know, is one of the lead programmers here in Toronto down at the Revue Cinema, and Mark, who does various other programming things. I do believe he's out on the East Coast. I'm drawing a blank. I don't have my notes in front of me, but they're both lovely people, and they're both hardworking people who know their cult cinema backwards and forwards. And we talk about sort of the need of programming, especially for cinemas these days, and just trying to get audiences out there to see the things that they want to see, and not necessarily the things that we, as the pundits, the experts, the programmers, may want people to see. It's trying to find a balance between the two, which is a very important thing. But if you haven't already, go to your favorite podcast provider. I mean, as you're subscribing for In the Seats with, obviously. Also go click on Movies and Chaos, because it is a darn good one. But first, enjoy our talk with Mark and Serena, because, that's also a darn good one. So enjoy. Now, I mean, just to kick this off officially, obviously, Serena and Mark, thank you both so much for the time today, and congratulations on the show. Are we going to call it a new show? Or is it like semi-new? How do we define this?
It's new this year, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, we've
I guess
I think we started in January. Yeah.
No, I mean, Movies and Chaos will likely be the title of my autobiography one day, but I mean, I'm just kind of curious, like, walk me through sort of the origin of you two getting together and wanting to sort of start this show and really sort of discuss to me, what you guys do, because especially now in kind of like the post-pandemic layout, it feels like programming is finally getting understood. Before I don't think it was quite as understood. Now it really feels like people who program and program well, especially when it comes to repertory cinema, are doing good work and really doing interesting work. Can you just talk a little bit about, I guess, why you guys wanted to start this?
Yeah, go
Mark can
ahead.
start first because it was his idea first.
Oh, okay. So I'd started a podcast with another friend of mine, Loretta Yu, about 2 years ago. It was during the pandemic. That was called the Ozone, about movies in the 2000s. And Loretta got busy with other things. No fallout happened between us or anything like that. But I kind of discovered that, I liked podcasting, and I knew I'd had Serena on as a guest on that show a couple times. And I always felt Serena was very informed about movies, and was an easy person to talk to. We were kind of like on, I think, similar levels of film knowledge and stuff. So that was all really easy. But, I just knew I wanted a new podcast, and kind of proposed this idea to her because Serena runs the programming at the Revue Cinema in Toronto. And I do like a monthly kind of cult film series in Halifax called Thrillema. And I was like, well, it's hard to find kind of hooks for movie podcasts, but what if we did one where we kind of talked about films as we were showing them? And I'm kind of personally interested in this idea of movies and the culture around them. Like, why do we like going to repertory cinemas? What is it about certain films that endure, and like what works about them now more than it did when they first came out, or what works differently? That idea was kind of interesting to me.
Yeah. I was really happy to join the podcast. I'm really interested in talking about programming, the chaos behind the programming, and what you have to go through. And like you said, Dave, it is becoming more of a popular like gig to be a programmer. And I think that there are people listening that want to get into it or are into it, and they want to understand others that are going through the same kind of struggles. But we're always trying to like make it work with the theme of the show. And we try to watch new movies as we go, but we generally watch the old movies that we're programming.
We talked about Cocaine Bear for a while. That's true.
Yeah, we did.
Now, I mean, what is it about? And I mean, almost part of this almost feels like it's tied into the streaming boom, but I mean, what is it about just the repertory cinema, or even sort of the counterculture that's out there? I mean, you guys even have a whole episode on sort of counterculture, and if there's space for it, and if it's dying or if it's not dying. And I mean, I'm kind of curious, why do we, as film fanatics, why are we getting more and more in our bubble about sort of looking back? Because I mean, I can only speak for myself in many ways, but I find myself even more voracious looking back on weird stuff that Vinegar Syndrome's putting out, or just really trying to find movies from other countries, and just really trying to expand my personal palette as much as humanly possible. I mean, I'm kind of curious for people who are trying to expand their audience's palette. Like, how do you guys go about, I guess, the day-to-day struggles of trying to find something that not just engages you, but you think they'll engage an audience as well?
I mean, you said a lot of things that are interesting. I think the idea, for me anyway, is that we are now kind of in a climate where, for the average person, movies are a lot less important. And so I think that's why there's this kind of nostalgia about what films used to be, because now everything's just content. You watch it all on your computer screen. And like, I'll talk to people 10 years younger than me. They don't care about making movies. They just want to make stuff. I don't think, like, they don't really care if it ends up on a cinema screen or not. But people our age, we kind of have this romantic idea of what movies were, and it's still a beautiful thing, I think. And there's people like, why do I like movies so much? I don't know, but there's a lot of people who just do, for whatever reason. And there's that magic to it that, personally, I want to communicate to an audience, or to bring that back. And like the people that come see movies at Thrillema, for example, they could just as easily be at home watching them for free. But there's something about getting out there in a communal space and seeing it on a screen that's bigger than you are. That's kind of a magical thing.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, one of the reasons why we program so many, old films at the Revue is because of that communal experience that people were missing for about 3 years during, the pandemic.
Mhm.
I think it was already going to go this way anyway. Films are just they're just not as memorable as the newer films are just not as memorable as they used to be. And we also have like a younger generation that is discovering a lot of these films and just even doing intros and there's movies that you think that everyone should have seen and nobody has seen.
Mm.
And like I last night I just hosted Cursed, the Wes Craven like disaster piece, and and nobody had seen it. I was like, okay, good, cool. This is the only way you should watch this. And yeah, so we're showing a lot of films that are not necessarily, great or two thumbs up or, anything that was really, really good. But there are movies that you can take dates on. You can go with your friends. You can go by yourself, have an experience in a theater that with people who really enjoy movies.
No,
Yeah,
I
I mean,
mean, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I feel that way too. Like there's movies we show that I personally could not argue are good movies. You know, there's like we'll show like Silent Night, Deadly Night Part Two. Not a good movie, but it's kind of there's something about seeing it with an audience. It's a good experience, that is hard to like capture watching it at home by yourself. Serena, I was gonna ask you, do you always poll your audience before like who hasn't seen this movie yet?
Yeah, most times I do.
Yeah, me too.
Just
Yeah.
just to see how old I should feel or how like
Right.
honestly, it's kind of when you're watching a movie that's not even 20 years old and everyone's like, "No, I never seen this." And
Mhm.
um it's
Yeah.
it's kind of disheartening, but it's also funny. And you get to see these people experience these movies that we love to program and we love to watch over and over. We get the benefit of watching people see it for the first time with a group full of people. So there's something magical about that.
No, and I mean, you're absolutely right. And I mean, I think something that, I mean, especially, and you guys have programmed it at the Revue when you guys have Lynch Oz coming up, which is
Mhm.
almost getting meta on the whole, movie inside of a movie inside of a movie thing. I mean, directed by obviously Alexander Philippe, who's done some great stuff, but I mean, it really does feel like programming has born movies about movies, which is born, birthing more program and all. It's almost like the cycle it is feeding itself. And I mean, for you, Serena, particularly with something like Lynch Oz, I mean, is it at least like a fun thrill to have a movie like that without having to have sort of the talk or have someone giving a speech on stage to make it feel almost didactic? It's like, no, look, we've got this 100-minute package, cinema inside cinema. Please come buy a ticket and watch it. And then you can ask me questions later.
Yeah, it's great to have like Janus Films. They always give us really good exclusives, and we have a huge, Lynch fan audience. Um, Always sold out. We got Inland Empire last year, the new 4K restoration, and we just did a sold out of Mulholland Drive, which we played the trailer of Lynch Oz in front of there, so we sold a lot of tickets after that. I saw Lynch Oz in Fantasia last year, and I just thought it was really like interesting and uh, I think it's it's very educational. And instead of watching a YouTube video, I think a lot of people go on a lot of rabbit holes when it comes to David Lynch. You don't have to be sitting at home or sitting on the toilet watching some theory about, you can actually watch this on the big screen and hear really like, well-known directors talk about what like their theories as to what um his work had to do with Wizard of Oz.
No, for sure, absolutely. It's one of those things where if you're a film fan, it definitely feels like sort of the avenues to go down, so many different rabbit holes are presenting themselves each and every day. But at the same time, it feels like that comes with a bit of a responsibility as well. And I mean, it's something you kind of touched on in your last episode, just with the recent passing of Tina Turner, and I mean, what happened recently at Cannes, and just sort of how we've come to a certain stage where we have quote unquote trigger warnings, and we never really had that in the past. Because I mean, I can even just think of like this weekend. I watched Police Academy, and I mean, it's just a goofy, ridiculous, fun movie. But I mean, the amount of racist, misogynist, horrible things that get said in that movie, also at the same time, are like, oh my god, this would actually be getting a trigger warning. Like for you guys as programmers, how do you kind of walk the line between something that you want people to see versus something that, okay, as much as I want people to see this, I may have protests outside my theater after I show it?
I mean, last year we wanted to do a John Waters movie, and it's kind of funny because I feel John Waters has taken on this reputation as being very progressive, but I wanted to show Female Trouble. Right. And I watched like half an hour. I hadn't seen it in 20 years. And I was like, there's no way I can show this. Like, it's so vicious. And we ended up showing Serial Mom instead. But I mean, for me, I have never personally had any complaints over things that I've shown. But I think that's also because our audience is sort of like, they know it's like horror and cult movies. But I don't know. I mean, there's still like times like that where it's like, it might not be worth the risk. The first thing I ever saw in a movie theater was when I was 3 years old, was the trailer for The Secret of Nim. It scared the hell out of me.
Yeah.
So I kind of grew up just thinking movies are out to hurt me. And that's kind of what I liked about them. Like there was something sort of dangerous. So I do come from a bit of a different perspective here, that I kind of like the sort of possible edginess of films. But I mean, I also understand people have different hangups, different things that get to them, and I try to be a little cautious of that in what I show.
Yeah, I think we take a lot of risks at the Revue, and I think that most times most of our audiences are really they just actually like people going on stage and talking about it. Sometimes there are films where I just kind of just leave it to the audience. Of like, if you read the event copy and if you saw that there was a viewer discretion advised and the reasons why, just to test that out. We don't usually get complaints, or I think I think it just I don't want to offend people, but at the same time, I don't think that people should be scared of being offended by something on screen. And like for example, last night we showed the Monster Squad, and if you watch it now, it's still a great movie. They use the F word.
The other F word
so many times. The other F word so many times in that movie that I'm sure it made a lot of people uncomfortable. But I think a lot of people are trying to understand. They're trying to get it. Like we're saying, the counterculture is probably it's not as bad as it used to be. I think a few years ago, when you program something, if you even thought about programming something, it would be, like for me, I want to program Tequila Sunrise, and I still don't know if that should be something I should do.
I've never seen that movie. Interesting.
It's great. It's like one of my favorites. But yeah, you just have to kind of pick your battles when it comes to showing movies. There's some people who ask me like, why aren't you showing Woody Allen movies? I'm like, are you kidding me? Like there's certain things I know I'm not going to walk into that. I'm not that dumb.
Yeah, I mean, certain movies kind of would come across like you're trying to make some statement by showing them now. Like a Woody Allen movie, unfortunately, feels that way now.
Yeah, Polanski even, and we have some people asking, why aren't you showing Polanski movies? And it's kind of weird because if I did Rosemary's Baby, I'm sure that would be fine. But if I do something else, exactly, you do like Kevin Spacey movies, you do Seven, you're fine. You do something else that was like a comedy.
Why is that?
I don't know. I think it's because if someone's like, a bad guy, I think.
I mean, but something's obviously changed in the culture in the last 5 years or so, because we knew this about Roman Polanski forever. And it's just now that it's kind of the issue, right? Do you remember that article that Molly Ringwald wrote about The Breakfast Club and like working in John Hughes movies? Like that was sort of strange to me, because I mean, obviously there's a lot of quote unquote problematic things in Breakfast Club. But I don't know, to me, part of what's interesting about older movies is that they are kind of these relics. They're like a snapshot at a different time where we did think other things were okay. And I get like, if you want to look at them in a contemporary lens, that's a problem. But as a kind of film historian, the side of me that's interested in the historical aspect of movies, I still want to. I don't want them to change those films. I kind of want to know what it was like in a way too. You
Oh
know?
no, absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a weird dynamic because I mean, I can understand on one end, like even using Woody Allen as an example, like if you wanted to program Radio Days or Midnight in
Mhm.
Paris, he's not in it, so that's something.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you were programming Manhattan, I could also understand that would maybe be sort of a different level. And I mean, it's really interesting to see how we've shifted in terms of just I guess being audiences and understanding what's okay and what's not okay depending on your sensibilities, I would imagine. And I mean, I think
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
We just hosted a Sex and the City movie because it was the 15th anniversary this week. So I had to introduce it, and I was a little nervous because I was like, "Oh, no one's going to come," and a lot of people came. And then I asked the question, "Who like Team Big, Team Aiden?" And I thought I was going to hear a lot of people boo Big and then say Team Aiden. Everyone said Team Big, and I was like, "Oh." So had this whole speech prepared, and then I did address the whole Chris Noth scandal, and it was kind of interesting because most times it's male driven movies that we have to, the art versus the artists, we have to
Right.
have that conversation. Um, but I said my reasoning to program this movie wasn't because we already know that Chris Noth isn't Mr. Big in the movie, and to not program a movie because of a man, we would be like there'd be a erasure of a franchise, a female-led franchise for 25 years. It's still going. Wouldn't have made sense, and the audience applauded that. So I just told people, like, don't feel guilty if you're Mr. Big, because I didn't say you're team Chris Noth, you're team Mr. Big. So I think people are starting to loosen up a little bit.
It feels
No,
that way to me too. Yeah.
yeah, no, I would definitely agree. But I mean, that it kind of dovetails into something I've been wanting to ask both of you because I mean, even if, for example, we pull something out of the blue from like say 1988 and you just say, okay, I'm gonna program Tom Hanks as Big. And I mean, you might get a decent crowd.
Mhm.
But conversely, if you say program Maniac Cop, you'll have them lined up around the corner. What is it about cult film and genre film that seems to be so sustaining from an audience standpoint?
I think the
I think
cult
it's
move.
cool. Sorry.
Yeah. So I was just gonna say, I think the cult audience is really invested in kind of movies as art, and they're very that they like the sort of dangerous element of them. No one's going to complain about Maniac Cop, but you're right, they might get some complaints about Big, um, because one of them is for I mean, I don't want to stereotype the audience, but the Maniac Cop audience kind of views themselves more as kind of social outsiders in a way that the big audience, the big is for your whole family.
Yeah, and Big, you're just like, ew, he's a kid
Yeah,
still.
yeah,
Yeah, having
yeah.
sex. That's
But
kind
like
of gross.
ultimately, if you show Big and someone complains, it's like you didn't make the movie. They're just getting mad at you because you have liked it. I mean, you're gonna like what you want, but I mean, I
That's
don't
the
know.
thing too. Like, there's a lot of universally loved films that are kind of just icky. And
Hmm.
Back to the Future is probably one of the ickiest movies ever made. If you think
Yeah,
about the premise is basically him trying really hard not to screw his mom, and that's
Well, that's the
and you
moral
don't
thing to try
think
to do. Yeah,
it's like you don't think about that.
yeah.
Even as an adult, I watch it and I'm like, I don't care. This movie's so great, and people bring their kids to that film.
yeah,
But yeah, Maniac Cop, like, I think the big part of it is that half the audience that comes to see something like Maniac Cop haven't seen it, and
right.
the other half have seen it a lot. So
Yeah,
you're kind of getting, like, yeah, you get that line around the block because you got so many different groups of people. Whereas Big, you're just going to get that one standard demographic, which is, and like I can pinpoint it to the age group and to like who in the neighborhood, like what neighborhood they are in. I could tell that. But for like a cult film, there'll be people in line that or live in the neighborhood, or even like in Kitchener or somewhere far away. We always have people from the States come for certain, like if we do a print, we always have people from the States travel to see it. So
Awesome.
yeah, and that's just only for horror films or cult films. You're not going to see that for, big. If I said big on presented on 35, no one's
Working
So
girl,
wait,
35 millimeter. Nobody cares.
so the big audience has all seen it before, basically. They're like grew up with that movie.
Yeah, it's a family. I think it's a family movie. It's definitely you're going to see more women. You're going to see more women in between the ages of 35 to 44. And it's no one's going to they're not going to spend any money at concessions. So
Mhm.
that's another reason too. Cult movie people and horror film lovers, they are very generous when it comes to buying concessions and drinks, and that's actually what keeps your doors open in the movie theater. It's not the box office, it's the concessions. So
Mhm.
and we do get a lot of complaints from Ronci people asking why the programming has skewed so far from where it used to be. Partially that's because, I mean, if the programming at the Revue is not all horror films, there's a lot. It does. I do try to make sure that we are tailoring to everybody's taste, but there are people that get really upset about it, and a big part of that too is that we can't get some newer films anymore because of well, this is a conversation for another day.
Exactly. Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You can say their name. I'll stop
Cineplex.
it.
The evil
Yeah,
empire. No,
so
absolutely.
but it's actually worked in our favor because a lot of people are really into watching old movies. We have a huge like midnight movie crowd. Some people were asking me why I would start a midnight series, and I said, no, I know there's a midnight series crowd here, and the way to do it is just to you program movies that other people saw other characters watching in movies. And that's what I started doing. I started watching some certain films, and I saw the first movie I saw was it was called Playing by Heart. It's like some silly 1998 romantic comedy.
I
But
remember that,
Angelina Jolie takes Ryan Phillippe to a midnight screening of Texas Chainsaw Massacre in LA, and I just like went with that. So, yeah, that's how that started, and I think that's how people just want to experience something that characters experienced in movies.
It's a good idea.
No, I
It's like
mean, yeah, go
in
ahead.
the Bodyguard. Sorry, in the Bodyguard, Kevin Costner takes Whitney Houston to see Yojimbo, and then buys her a samurai
Yeah.
sword. Is that right? A good comment.
Yep.
Yeah, no, that is right. Yeah.
It's how you date in the 90s. Yeah.
No, I mean, I'm curious, like from both your perspectives. And I mean, I just really start putting a bow on this because I mean, again, it's early June, but I mean, I can imagine Serena, you're already well into July and getting that locked down.
Mhm.
How do you guys stay ahead of the curve? Because I mean, especially in this day and age, from a pop culture standpoint, things move so fast, and you want to be programming stuff that is relevant to the month. Like obviously, Prince's birth. You've got Purple Rain coming in a couple of days. You knew that in advance. That was an easy one. But I mean, again, I can imagine, with Tina Turner passing away, I can imagine that's a quick phone call going, "Oh, quick, can we get a print in for this pretty soon or something?" Like, I can imagine those are day-to-day challenges that you guys having, not just for programming, but even from a podcast standpoint. Like every 2 weeks, it's like, okay, we got to come up with something. Oh, let's do that. That just happened. Okay.
Yeah, the Tina Turner thing was just weird because I asked for it the day before she died. So that was just that's how
Wow.
a lot of the programming happens. It kind of just works out.
Right.
And you just have to, I don't know what for Mark, like how you like when you program what you think, but I just try to get like anniversaries. You just kind of have to think well in advance. Try to like look up weird unofficial holidays and but basically do what fits the vibe of your theater. But yeah, you do want to be ahead of the curve, especially when you have other theaters in the city to not compete with, but to work with.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, there are certain like kind of big dates every year. So, we try to do something for Pride Month. We try to do like a big fun summer movie, something we haven't shown it yet, but I keep thinking we should do like the 95 Mortal Kombat, which Cineplex doesn't seem to know they should show now. Just things like that. Yeah. So, but a lot of it is, it's like, it's not only me choosing this stuff at Thrillema, it's me and three other people. And I always kind of never wanted to be the boss. So I try to keep that like a pure democracy. So we always kind of like hash it out. So, and sometimes like someone will keep pushing for a movie that I don't really want to show, but like, fine, let him have it. It's just 1 month, so that's kind of how I see that too. And, hopefully everyone gets the film they want in at some point. Yeah.
Yeah, we have 12 series at the Revue, so we have a lot of programmers too that they have their finger on the pulse of all what's like trendy too for their own series. So that's also really helpful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
From both your perspectives, because honestly, like especially in recent months and years after the pandemic, there had been screams and calls that cinema is dead, nobody's going to the movies anymore, blah 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 blah. I mean, obviously, Spider-Man had a big weekend, that's one thing. But on one end, people in our line of work, either my work or your work, we don't necessarily need to be the ones on a soapbox talking about Spider-Man or a Marvel movie or John Wick. Like that stuff's going to take care of itself. It's the stuff just left of center, just below sort of that top tier of what people consider to be the movies. How important is it from your perspective just to try to keep that alive? Because I mean, even like for me, from a personal standpoint, like every time I go to TIFF or I go to film festivals, I purposely go out of my way not to cover sort of those big top 10 movies that everyone's talking about, because it's like, no, wait, there's like 90 to 150 more that I could be talking about. How do you sort of stay out of the populist and try to really find the right, I guess, voice for sort of the rest of the stuff is probably the right way to put it.
I mean, I think for me, it's just, I've seen a lot of movies, and I mean, I try to, I think there's certain movies that get everyone excited. Like we showed the trailer a couple years ago. I remember putting the trailer on from Bram Stoker's Dracula. Everyone like just went ape shit thinking we were about to show it. And so stuff like that just has a massive appeal is there. But then there's other movies that people have heard of, but they haven't seen.
Right.
And those seem to do really well. Like The Old Wicker Man was really big for us, for example, because I don't think many people had seen it. Everyone had heard of it because of the Nick Cage remake, So it's sort of that. I mean, to me, there's kind of like a sweet spot. I sort of like movies that are just off kind of every beaten path in a way, and that's why they stand out. They sort of combine sort of highbrow and lowbrow, and I think more movies sort of try to do that now, but that was not a popular idea. Like even up till the end of the last century, like everything just felt very like segregated. But I mean, there's all these kind of weirdo films that I think are good. But at the same time, if you show a movie that no one's heard of, we haven't really tried to do that. I don't know how that would go.
We definitely have, but it does come with like time. It didn't just, you have to be able to program what people love. And then when you get them in there, and then you show them trailers for people like the like-minded trailers, and they're like, oh, that sounds cool. And then we just keep getting more obscure and more obscure, and people keep trusting our tastes if they like the movies that they're seeing. So that's one of my strategies is just to get people in the theater to watch what they love, and then just discover what we love.
Right.
Because I think that's a responsibility of a programmer. You can't just program all the shit that you want people to watch. You got to kind of get them to what, like, you have to like lure them in first, and then still keep giving them what they want, and I think that the fighting for the indie films that we love, that a lot of people don't, is you still have to give people what they want or what they think they want, and then they start to learn that they actually like something else instead. And I think that's a beautiful thing about programming.
Amen to that. Now, I mean, last question. You've both written films, and you both programmed for theaters. What's harder, programming or writing your own?
Writing your own, because I have like a lot of movies that are still in development hell. So definitely the programming it's harder daily work, but it's definitely something that I like to do.
Yeah, I gotta agree. The programming causes me almost no stress. I mean, it helps that like I have a team of people. we all do it. Writing movies is like, it's great when you're super inspired, but I really find the difficulty with art right now in general, it's not coming up with fresh ideas. It's you just do the stuff and you don't know, is anyone ever going to see this? And I think just getting seen with the art is kind of the difficult thing because you got to put a lot of time into that. Um, but yeah, I mean, if you program movies, you know you're gonna, you might not, it might not be the greatest night ever, but it'll probably be a pretty good one. And so there's always like a payoff that you know is going to be there. That's the way I
Well,
see it.
Serena, Mark, I mean, thank you for the insight on just programming for cinema, and I mean, and also with the podcast, which I've been loving. Please go find it
Oh,
on
thank
your
you.
podcast provider of choice. But Serena, Mark, tell the audience where they can find you, either theatrically or on the podcast world.
You can find me on well, you can like Revue Cinema. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, uh Serena Whitney, and then I run Drunken Cinema. You can find me there as well.
Yeah, you can find our podcast, Movies Chaos is I think the Twitter. My personal Twitter is Mark Palermo, just my name, one word. My Instagram is the true Mark Palermo. Used to be the real Mark Palermo, but I got hacked and had to change it. True Mark Palermo now.
Excellent. All right. Well, you know what? You both keep up the good work, and obviously, thank you so much for the time today.
Thank you,
Thanks
Dave,
so
for
much.
having us.
My
All
pleasure.
right.
Yeah.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.